Hello everybody, welcome back to English Champion. This is episode 60. Shaved my head, it had been a few years since I've done that. I was ready for something different. We are diving into a serious topic today. If you've been paying attention to the news of education in the last several weeks, maybe you've heard of the story coming out of Harvard, where maybe, just maybe, people are starting to address the problems with grading and how that affects academic reputation and how students feel about their school and all of that. I want to talk about that report, as well as get some views from the students, as well as from some of the faculty that aren't necessarily affiliated with Harvard itself, but also have a unique perspective on what might be contributing to some of these problems. So we're going to look at the report itself. I'm not going to read all of it to you because it's a little long. I'm just going to highlight some of the key points, and then we'll look at a couple other just excerpts of articles as well. So this is from last month, and the thing that I want to highlight here and just make sure we're catching is, not to toot my own horn, but this is what I've been talking about for a couple years now. I said on an episode, one of my earlier episodes, I think it was titled, DEI is just a symptom. There's a bigger problem here, something like that. And this is confirming everything that I've been talking about. Okay, that no one ever wants to get out in the open. Thankfully, Harvard is sort of starting to do that a little bit here. I would love it if other schools followed in the footsteps. But I had said back then, I said, look, everyone's freaking out about the DEI stuff, okay? And look, that's it. That is definitely its own issue, and that should be dealt with. I don't know if what the current administration is doing is helping very much. I don't know about that. But what I was saying is, that's just like the shiny object that everyone's chasing. There's a much deeper problem here. Those people just focusing on that, like they aren't seeing the forest for the trees. There's a huge systemic problem here. And Harvard is starting to land on it. And that is that standards and quality at universities have plummeted. We cannot trust what universities are doing regarding their assessment of students, what they're teaching, how they're grading, the reputation of the school. All of that is now up in the air because none of it makes any sense. And we just keep going along with it thinking, well, their name is Harvard, so I guess it must be good. Well, finally, these folks at Harvard are saying, yeah, you know what, maybe we're not as good as we have been saying we are. Maybe the public, their doubts about whether our students are as smart as we would like them to be, that's up for debate now. It's having some effect. I don't know to what degree yet, but having some effect potentially on their reputation. And the thing is, it's not just Harvard. This is everywhere. Every school is dealing with this, at least almost every school. It looks like UATX, University of Austin, is fighting against this, and they are, shooting through the roof. They are crushing it right now. They just announced that their enrollment keeps expanding, and they're now, every student goes there for free because everyone wants to donate to that school because it's going to be so rigorous and highly academic. Okay, well, that's the right path. That's what schools should be on. Instead, everyone's looking at every other university and going, well, is this university even legitimate? Even if you're Harvard, how seriously should I take what you guys are doing there? Are these kids actually as smart as they think they are, or we think they are? Are they really qualified to take on the jobs of the future? Did that A mean anything? We don't know anymore. And so this report is, I don't know, I'm hoping kind of the tip of the iceberg that causes some actual changes, not only at that school, but across the country, because we need some systemic changes in what education is. And I've talked about this on other podcasts, so go back and watch my other stuff where I've said, look, we're forgetting what education is supposed to be. It's become credentialing, and that's what Harvard has gotten caught up in, and their students have gotten caught up in. And so we give A's because that's what the kids want. We're serving the customer. And then the rest of the culture, employers and everyone else go, wait a second, if everyone's getting an A, then how do I know who's actually smart? How do I know whom I should hire? Because there's no differentiation between any of you graduates or you current students. So it's a huge problem. It needs systemic change, whatever that might be. But at least they're starting to address it. Whether anyone will take it seriously, we'll find out. But I want to share with you some of the key points. There have been good summaries about it, and I thought, that's all we're going to get is summaries of the article. And then a few days ago, I was saying, has anyone posted this anywhere? They seem to keep it under wraps and keep it only within the Harvard community. Because every time I would go to find it, it was the link was blocked for only Harvard people, access for only Harvard people. And so it wasn't public. The other day, though, I found it. And so I've been going over it, and I will share portions of it with you, some of it doesn't really need examination. But there are a few key insights here, and we're going to talk about it. So this is going to be a longer episode, as we're going to dive into this, as well as again, some student perspectives, as well as another faculty insight that I thought was valuable too. So let's start taking a look. It was called Recentering Academics at Harvard, Update on Grading and Workload. This was prepared by Amanda Claybaugh, Dean of Undergraduate Education. I don't know anything about her background. I don't know. I could Google her, I guess, but I don't know what her main focus is or how she got that position, but I'm glad she wrote this report. So we'll see what she has found in her research. All right, so it starts off by giving some just data on where the grades are currently. And the stat, I won't read this whole section, but the stat that's just so amazing is that they apparently changed the cutoff for their cum laude graduates based on, I don't know, based on how many students there are. I'm not quite sure how they determine it. But what they have determined for summa cum laude cutoff in 2024 was 3.985. And in 2025, this past year, it was 3.989. So they continue having to increase the number of the threshold for summa cum laude graduates. Obviously, because there's too many, and so they need that extra differentiation. Most schools that I've been a part of and that I attended, it was 3.9. That was just always the rule. 3.9 is summa, 3.75 usually is magna, and then 3.5 often, maybe 3.6 depending on the school, is just regular cum laude graduates. So there's just always a fixed number. Well, it's gotten so bad at Harvard that everyone is above those lines that they need to actually change the lines to make it more, again, more differentiation between the students. So now it's 3.989. So basically it's like, I guess you would get straight A's, and if you got one A minus, that is probably the designation for summa now. I don't know. But I just thought that was such a weird piece of data to offer. Because it's just so specific now. And it's like, why don't you just keep it at 3.9? Again, just some background. This was all part of the introduction. And so I just want to get to what are they finding in the current situation? And so one passage that stood out was in 2005, this is the one that got passed around over the last week or two that was in all the summaries and news reports. In 2005, A's accounted for 24% of all grades. In 2015, 10 years later, it was at 40%. In 2025, another 10 years later, it was at 60%. And unless we believe that the work done by that 60% is truly of exceptional quality as defined in our guidelines, we can see inflation in our grades. So that's how quickly it's risen. In 20 years, it went from 24% of all grades were A's, now it's at 60%. Now, the obvious logical argument by many would be, well, you're just getting really bright students. After all, it's Harvard. They're the best students in the country, right? So it makes sense that they would be getting so many A's. But again, Harvard has always gotten the best students. So how come 20 years ago, only 24% of grades were at the A level, and then it's gradually gone up to 40, and now it's at 60. Well, it's the same batch of students. They're all the elite students in the country. So it's not like the kids have gotten smarter. And when you actually look at other metrics from other authors, the tendency is to see that actually students have not gotten smarter. Most SAT scores and AT scores have actually declined over time. And so to assume that, well, all of our high school kids are just that much smarter now, that's just, most research shows that's not the case. So now again, Harvard is going to get the best of those every single year. But again, why would there be, if you're getting the same proportion of the country coming to your school, why would the grades shift so high from 24 all the way up to 60%? That's a huge jump. A couple paragraphs later, the report continues. When asked about grading in general, nearly all faculty expressed serious concern. They perceived there to be a misalignment between the grades awarded and the quality of student work. Faculty newly arrived at Harvard are surprised at how leniently our courses are graded, and those who have taught here for a long time are struck by the difference from the recent past. Students, for their part, were more sanguine. I think the current grading system is working very well, one reported. I haven't heard many complaints from other students either. Well, yeah, when everyone gets an A, they're not going to complain, obviously. Some students do complain, however, about a different kind of misalignment. They perceive there to be disparities in grading between concentrations, between courses, and even between sections of the same course. So this is what it's so important. And again, many administrators and faculty don't think about this. They think, they think about their department, they think about their classes, they think about the school in general, and they should, of course. But what they don't think about is how students react to these things. They don't think about this stuff from the student perspective. And so what they're saying is exactly right. And I saw this at my universities where I've taught, especially at my most recent one. because the students can tell who their smart peers are. They know. And so when maybe they are bright and they get a good grade and they look around the classroom or they talk to each other in the cafeteria or in the dorms or wherever, and they find out that other kid also got an A, and they go, that kid's a dummy. How did that kid get an A in this class? Whenever I was in a group with that kid, or whenever we were discussing our projects, I could see that that kid can't do the work. How did he get an A? That's the same grade I got. What's going on here? The students talk. They know what's happening. Okay, we think because of all the FERPA stuff that the kids, we keep everything such a secret and you only know your score. No, they don't. They know everybody's score. Everyone talks about what they got in the class. So the smart kids all go, wait a second, how come we're in the same class? I'm way smarter than you and I got the same grade as you. I knew you turned in a project late and yet you still got an A. Or you missed 7 days of class this semester and you still got a high score. What's going on here? Or between courses, like you're taking the same class, English 101 or whatever, and one teacher gives out a bunch of A's and another teacher gives out more normalized grades. And the kids go, wait a second, it's the same class. Shouldn't they be graded the same? Like what's going on here? Why within the same department and the same exact course, we all did the same projects? How come that teacher grades one way and another teacher grades another way? So the kids talk, not only within the class, but across classes. And then of course they know they have friends from other concentrations or degree programs where the kids, and this is a harder problem to deal with. Those first two are very easy to deal with. This last one is a little trickier where it's like, well, the physics student looks at the sociology student and goes, wait a second, you're getting straight A's in sociology, yet you don't have to do nearly the type of work I have to do in physics. Like I have to bust my butt to do all this math in my physics class, and yet you're getting straight A's. Like this doesn't seem quite fair. So, the kids notice. That's the thing. And so when we say, or when professors and administrators get together and they think, well, this is the right policy for us as the faculty and the administrators, or for the school and its reputation in general, yeah, you got to think about it from the kids' perspective. If the kids want to be differentiated from each other, we think all the kids, the way kids talk, they might say they want things to be more fair and equal. No, they don't. They want to stand out, especially when they go to Harvard. They want to stand out. The reason they went there is to stand out from the rest of the college population at other schools. But even within Harvard, many of them want to stand out among the other Harvard kids. So it's not enough just to get to be a Harvard student. They're like, I want to be an A Harvard student, and I want not everybody else to get A's. I want my work and my intelligence to be separated from yours. Yeah, you're bright too. You got into Harvard, but I'm even better and I deserve an A. Maybe you can get an A minus, but there needs to be a separation. Well, that's not happening because everyone's getting an A. So that's a huge problem. So the functions of grading, like, well, what's grading for anyway? And she gives a breakdown of a couple ideas. One is motivation, and she says, we want the grading to kind of prompt students to want to be more engaged with their courses. Like if we give you an assessment and you get a certain grade, that should motivate you to want to do better and want to learn more and all of that. And she's saying that's just not happening. Students' level of engagement isn't necessarily driven by their grades. Well, that's definitely true. And so one line from this paragraph was that students will do what they need to do to earn an A, but they are seldom moved to do more than that. Once the A is secured, students direct their energies elsewhere, adding either more courses to their schedules or taking on more demanding extracurriculars. So that's exactly right. And this isn't just at Harvard, of course. This is everywhere where because everything revolves around the grade, then the kids just go, well, what do I have to do to get an A? I'll just do that. It's not about learning. It's not about acquiring skills. It's not about becoming a wise young adult. It's not about developing a mentor relationship with the professor. It's just, well, what threshold do I have to reach? Because after I reach that, like, I'm not doing anything else. I got my grade, so what do I care? The thing, though, that happens at other schools, because at Harvard, the A is what kids are reaching for. But at other schools, it's worse than that. So if you're not an elite school where you're getting elite students who think like that, you're getting the average college kid, let's say. Well, lots of average college kids don't really care what grades they get. Many of them might think, well, as long as I get a B, then that's fine. And so then this motivation and effort only goes to that level. Once they're at that B level in the class, they're like, I don't need to do anymore. I don't care if I get a bad grade on this paper. As long as I stay above a B, that's fine. Or maybe for some kids, it's a C. Like, I just want to pass. I just want to be kind of average. I don't need the high grades. I don't have time to put in to get a high grade. As long as I'm getting a C, that's cool. So this is what happens. Grades are generally not good motivators because, again, the kid will mostly just reach to the level that they already care about. And if all you care about is a C, you're not going to do any more work. If it's a B, that you're going to stay at that level. And if it's an A, then you're going to become obsessed with getting an A, but you're still not there for learning. You're still not there to get the maximum out of that education. And in this case, it's an elite, supposedly, it's supposed to be an elite education. And now instead they go, I'll get my A in here and then I'll go do this activity that will also look good on a resume in the future. It's like, okay, so now you're doing a bunch of stuff that looks good. It looks like you're smart because you got an A. It looks like you're doing all these other things because you're participating in these extracurriculars. But are you actually doing them for the right reasons to actually learn and have true development? Well, no, they're just doing it to, as I've said 1,000 times, check boxes. Like just tell me what I need to do, and that's all I'll do. Well, that's the incentive structure we've built in to these grading systems. We also use it not just for motivation, but for information, she says, the author writes. She says, we expect grades to give students reliable information about whether they have mastered skills or material, and students mostly believe that they do. What students think they know is very different than what they actually know. There's lots of research that shows that students think they're up here. It's very, very, kind of a Dunning-Kruger effect. Like, oh, I think I'm up here. It's like, no, you're not actually. But faculty report that the grades they're currently giving aren't differentiated enough for that. In the view of faculty, grades currently distinguish between work that meets expectations or fails to meet expectations. But beyond that, the grades don't distinguish much at all. So in other words, like they're kind of running on a pass-fail system. The pass-fail system, though, is just A or not A. And so it's like, well, their work is pretty good. I guess I'll give them an A. So like they could just go to a pass-fail system. And I'll talk about some potential opportunities for that towards the end. But that's kind of how the faculty are operating because they either can't tell the difference between the kids or more likely they don't want to tell the difference between the kids. And they're like, oh, I'll just give everybody an A. It's easier to deal with because there's reasons for that, as we'll get into. Quote, students know that an A can be awarded, one faculty member observed, for anything from outstanding work to reasonably satisfactory work. It's a farce. Exactly. When the students know, well, as long as I just do something and turn it in and I look like I tried kind of hard, it doesn't really matter if it's not that good. The teacher's going to give me an A. So therefore, that's all I'm going to do. So the teacher's grading is causing the incentive in the student's performance. It's quite obvious. Or, as another faculty member put it more delicately, there's not much resolving power at the top. As a result, students don't always have an accurate sense of how they are performing on where their strengths truly lie. So yeah, we get these students who then they get A's, but then maybe they go to a different class, or now they're advancing throughout their 4 years, and maybe they happen to have a teacher who's more rigorous in grading, and they're stunned that they're getting maybe a B now, and they're like, but I got A's in all my other classes. I don't understand. I thought I was good at this. Well, either that teacher is now being unfair, or that teacher is now grading you accurately, and you've been misinformed this whole time. So the information part of it is key. We have to be able to be honest with the kids so that they have the proper information about where they're going and, like I said, what their strengths are. Otherwise, they're completely, they have a false sense of who they are. This happened to me many times, not within the college level, but the jump, sometimes in the college level, but especially the jump from high school to college, where a kid would have my class and I'd give them a D on their papers, and they would come to me stunned, like, I don't understand. I got A's in all my English classes in high school. I'm a good writer. Why am I getting a D in here? And I would say, well, you're not a good writer. And I would have to sympathize with them. I'd say, look, I feel bad that you had bad teachers throughout high school that gave you the wrong grades because you're not a good writer at this point. So you are a D-level writer or a D-level student in the effort and work and focus and all that other stuff. Right now, that's your grade. That's the accurate information I'm giving you. I'm sorry to tell you the previous information you got was wrong and it really harmed you. So that's what we're doing when we don't give kids proper information. We think we're helping them. We think we're being nice by going, well, I want to be the good teacher. I want to help as many kids as I can, so I'm going to give that kid an A. Well, then they butt up against somebody who's actually doing their job right and gives them a C or whatever grade. And now the kid is completely confused about their place in the world. I thought I was an A student. Now it looks like I'm a C student. I don't understand this world anymore. Like that's what happens. And so now the next teacher, they look like a jerk or like they're being unfair or that you're just being mean or picking on the kid. It's like, no, I'm actually assessing you accurately. It was all those other teachers that were wrong, actually. Here's why this isn't good enough. Here's why you haven't earned an A. So the information part is key. And yeah, if we can't inform students of where they are accurately, it throws off everything, because as we'll get further into this, it messes up grad school stuff. It messes up employment, because now no one has the proper information on how skilled the kid is or how knowledgeable the kid is. So when you don't do this properly throughout K through 12, and then definitely through college, there's always this chain, causal effect. And now everyone's misinformed. I thought your kids were bright. They went to Harvard after all and they got A's, but I hired him and he's a dummy. Why is that? Well, yeah, because you got wrong information. That's the problem. The student got the wrong information. Another reason that we do grading is for distinction. One thing she says was, for some prizes, they rely on confidential letters to learn which of the many students awarded A's actually distinguished themselves. Okay, so this is a key thing too. Like, instead of just having a grade, I think this letter of recommendation or letter of award or something is really important. Could be a really valuable piece of information, because now, maybe to get accepted into grad school, or maybe to access that internship, or even part of your grading. I don't know how that would work, but like maybe you do it on a recommendations methodology, that it's not just a letter grade. Like, you have to get me to actually recommend you for the next class or for the next internship or the next whatever, for graduation even. That would be very interesting. It would be a lot more work for teachers, of course. But then teachers could actually focus on the students they felt performed the best. And then you would be more accurate, because now your name is attached to it. I really like that idea. And to be honest, I wrote very few letters of recommendation during my years as a professor. And the reason why is because I had very few students who I felt earned my recommendation. When I would do it, I did it happily, and I wrote very kind recommendations for various jobs. I had students who wanted to be teachers or whatever field they wanted to go into, and they had one requirement was you had to have me for more than one class. I wasn't going to assess you just based on one class. I needed to see you perform well multiple times. And then even kids who were good students, like, you had to get very high grades, and I needed to have kind of that mentor relationship. Like, we talked all the time. You were in my office. We were working together on projects. Like, I needed to see that you were putting in the investment and the effort in addition to actually performing well. Those are the only students I gave recommendations to. And so I had many students ask me, well, not that many, because not many students would get super high grades in my class. And so they only went to the teachers that got high grades, of course. But the ones that did, even among those students who performed well in my class, I would still be very picky on who I gave letters of recommendation to. And then the ones I did, again, I was very, very generous with it. And the reason why I was picky about it is because that's my name on there. And I don't want a bad reputation in the community where I'm recommending kids who actually aren't very smart. And then they get hired based on my recommendation, and their bosses go, I get an email or something or a call a year later going, hey, you gave a recommendation to this employee we hired, and they're terrible. We actually had to let them go because they were so bad. So please don't send us any more of your students. I mean, that I would never want that. And so I want my name and reputation to be solid. And so I only sent recommendations to the very best students. And even at Harvard, you can differentiate between the very best and everyone else who's just a normal student. And I like using letters of recommendation as a way of sifting through those differing students. Also, grades are for preserving the academic culture. She has in a section called Constraining Student Choice, where students are terrified of the A minus. And so the students are acting in ways that research on loss aversion would certainly predict. While their choice of concentration is driven by their sense of what would be most interesting and most useful, their choice of courses is instead determined by their sense of the grades they think they'll receive. They feel compelled to choose courses that seem to guarantee A's over courses they know would be more valuable for them or simply more interesting. Okay, so yeah, you might, even though physics is very difficult, you might still go into physics because you like physics, and so you think that's going to be a really cool future for you. But even within the concentration, within your major, students are picking the classes and the teachers they think are going to be easiest. So they're not pursuing a challenge. They're not pursuing what teacher am I going to learn the most from? They're going, okay, I'm in physics, but while I'm in physics, I'm probably going to want to take the easiest teacher. Well, that's not good. That's not what you want. You want everybody to be rigorous, all your faculty. And so this is something I've talked about before, and this is why having faculty be your academic advisors is so key, and why I did it in my department. When I was in charge of my program, I wanted all my students to be working on their course schedules for the next year with me. I did not want them going and talking to the staff people in the advising office or some student success person. No, because those people don't know what's going on in the classes, and their incentive is skewed. They want to make the kid happy. And so they say, if the kid's like, I don't want to take too hard of a teacher. So the student success people or the advising staff go, oh, well, I know this teacher, he's real easy. Or I see the grades coming out from that class. That class is going to be easier than this one, so let's put you in this one. Like, well, that's not what's best for the kid, perhaps. And so as a faculty member who advised my own students, I would tell my students, hey, this teacher, she's pretty tough, but you're going to learn so much. You're going to be way better off having this teacher. So let's put you in this class. I know you think you want things easy, but I want you to be great. You're my advisee. You're in my major. I want you to be successful and a good representative of our department. And the way to do that is to get as smart as possible. So if you just work really hard, you'll be fine. But this teacher, she's a bit tough, but I'm gonna put you in her class. So let's fill out the registration, put you in her class, and that's gonna be the best thing for you. Like that's how you advise. Okay, you don't advise based on, well, what does the kid want? Well, the kid wants the easiest, most convenient thing. And so I want to be in a class at 10 a.m. with that easy teacher so that I guarantee an A and I can sleep in a little bit. Yeah, that's what every kid wants. So our job as advisors, and that's what the staff people do. They're like, oh, well, when do you want to go to class? Oh, nothing before 10. Okay, no problem. So you get all the kids clumped into these classes. And meanwhile, all the other teachers who teach all throughout the day, they don't have any kids, or the teachers who are actually rigorous, they get a reputation on campus that no one wants to take their class. And so now that looks kind of bad. And they're wondering, am I going to get fired because my classes aren't making now? It's a whole, again, causal chain of things that happen when you try to appease the kid, all sorts of problems happen. Whereas if you stay at one rigorous standard, well, then you can maintain that. And you can say, look, it doesn't matter what class you take. They're all hard. So stop looking for an easy path. Okay, then the kid just takes whatever they take because it doesn't matter. So this is, one, it's a reality of how students choose their classes, but it's also a reality of what goes on with advising. If you're a university that employs advising staff, those people are nice. I'm not saying they do a bad job. I'm just saying under the guise of thinking that they're caring about the kid, they're actually not helping the kid as much as they think. The person who would help the kid more is the professor. The faculty should be doing the advising, not staff members who know nothing about the field, who know nothing about those individual classes. They should not be your advisors. What it also does, exacerbates stress, because now the kids are just focused on getting the A, and if they panic if they get an A-. It also hollows out academics. When the median grade is an A, academics can start to feel, as students sometimes put it, fake. Our students know what real achievement feels like. Exactly, I talked about that before, where the students can look around and tell what's going on here. They experience it in their research, their sports, their clubs, and the startups they launch, and the nonprofits they found. But they don't always feel that same sense of achievement in their courses. One student lamented that no instructor had ever told her that she could do better work, and several mentioned sitting for finals that they could have aced on the first day of class. Yeah, the students know what's going on. And this is something I've talked about 1,000 times. It's so weird that we treat academics differently than every other part of our life. Because as I said, they know what it feels like in the other domains of life, like in their sport. They know that if they don't perform, they lose, or they get cut from the team, or they get benched, or whatever there's always a consequence that they don't like. But in academics, we go, oh, well, we don't want them to feel bad, so let's give everyone a high grade. Like, they know that's not how the real world works, especially these high achieving kids. But even the low level kids, I was at a school that had tons of athletes. So that was the pitch I always made to them. Like, you know how this goes. In your sport, if you don't do your job, you're going to lose the game, or you're going to be benched, or if you're really bad, you're going to get cut. Like, that's the same as getting a low grade on a paper. Like, there's a consequence. You didn't do the skill in this case at the level that it needed to be done. So there's a consequence. It's a form of a little punishment. Now, we're going to write more papers, so you're going to get more chances. Just like during your season, there's more games to play, so you're going to get another chance next week. But at some point, if you're not doing the task, Just like in your sport, you're going to keep losing, or in this class, you're going to keep failing, and eventually you're going to fail the class. And you're going to have to do all of this over again. So what do you want? Do you want to be successful or not? So like the kids know, or yeah, in your startups they launch or the nonprofits they found, yeah, if you can't budget properly, if you don't have the right product, if you don't know how to market, if you don't do all the things that go into a startup, yeah, the business is going to fail. There's a consequence. You don't get buoyed up because you're a nice kid or because you go to Harvard or because you worked really hard. No. There's results. You either do them or you don't. That's it. In sports, you do it or you don't. You win or you lose. Your startup either succeeds and you stay in business or you fail and you go out of business. That's it. Well, it's the same thing in school. At least it should be. You either can do it or you can't. You're either at the level, our university or our department or my class or whatever level we're talking about. Either you do this or you don't. And if you don't, there's a serious consequence. Because if I don't have a serious consequence, then we don't know who can actually do the thing. If there's no score in the game, then how do we know who's good at this game? We don't. Okay, so now again, the people involved actually do know. That's the big irony. Like it's the same thing with little kids in their sports where they don't keep score yet. Like every kid knows who the best players are. Like you're not shielding them from anything. The kids who aren't good at their sport in t-ball or soccer or whatever, like they can look around and go, "Oh, that kid's way better than me." And either they choose to get better over time or they don't. But they all know. So why don't we just be honest about it? Everyone can tell who's talented. So let's reward those people who are genuinely talented. Let's tell the people who aren't, "Hey, you're not at this level. You're here. So if you don't get better, you're not going to be around much longer. So you better work on that." The students know already, so just enforce it. It's not hard. I don't understand why these schools aren't doing it. And again, I know Harvard's a different place because everyone there thinks they deserve to be there. In many cases, I'm sure they probably do. But we're going to talk about some of their misinterpretations as we go. But yeah, this is part of the problem is as the student said, it seems fake. Yeah, all of this seems fake when, like I said at the beginning, if one student goes, "Well, if I got an A and that dumb kid got an A, then I guess this is all not real. This class is fake." Or yeah, if every kid at the university gets summa cum laude, then yeah, what's the point of the distinction? Why even have it? It doesn't matter. Continues on to some other parts of the report. Workload is notoriously difficult to measure, but our data suggests that students are working as hard as they ever have, if not more. In the spring of 2025, students reported that they spent over 6 hours outside of class for each of their courses. In spring of 2015, 10 years ago, they reported spending 5.5 hours outside of class. College surveys point in the same direction. In 2025, another survey asked students how much time they spend every week on academics. 45 hours a week was the modal response, compared to 10 to 15 hours a week on extracurriculars. In 2024, the Dean of Students Office asked students how much time they spent on extracurriculars. 83% of students reported spending less than 10 hours a week. Okay, so those numbers are a little weird unless I'm just not understanding how this is. 83% of students reported spending should be fewer than 10 hours a week. Grammar problem. Even at Harvard, there's grammar problems. Whereas before it said many students were at 10 to 15 hours a week. So I'm not sure which is accurate there. But much of the data over the past, again, 20 years has shown that the number of hours worked outside of class has declined. This is saying that actually the hours have gone up. I'm not sure which is accurate. Anything with student reporting, you probably can't take very seriously because they're always going to say, "Oh, I worked really hard on this," even though they maybe didn't. I think a tiny element that could be skewing the data here is not only do students overreport, they also overestimate how much effort or how much focus they're actually devoting when they are actually working outside of class. So for example, I might say, "I worked on this paper or I studied for this test for an hour last night." It's like, okay, maybe that's technically accurate. From 9 to 10 p.m. you were studying for the test. Okay. But while you were studying, did you also have a Netflix movie on the background? Were you also listening to music on your phone? Were you also texting your friends? What else was going on there? Were you actually focused for an hour? Or were you just at your desk and had your textbook open for an hour, but you weren't really studying that hard? Well, we can't possibly know the difference between those two types of environments. One where I sat and read my textbook with no distractions in dead quiet and full focus while I took notes for an hour versus the kid who said, "Well, I sat there with my textbook, but I was also doing these other things." It's like, well, You can't just say that they studied for an hour because those hours are very different. So the time spent outside of class is tricky. Again, most research in the last 20 years has shown that the number of hours of study outside of class has decreased. This is saying that it's increased a bit. It's hard to tell. Indeed, 69%, again, faculty don't believe that they're actually doing much studying outside of class. Oh, and one other thing, 45 hours a week, that like there's no kid is spending 45 hours a week on studying outside of class. That's impossible. There's no way they're doing that. If anyone who's been a college student, even at Harvard, where it's supposed to be rigorous, there's no way kids are spending that many hours per week outside of class on studying. They're playing video games, they're partying, they're drinking, they're dating, they're on their phone, they're whatever they're doing, most of it's not studying. So 45 hours a week, I've never met a kid who studied that much, ever. In my 20 years around college students, never once. So I don't believe that. And faculty don't believe it either. Indeed, 69% of the faculty who responded to the Harvard Crimson survey this year either strongly agreed or somewhat agreed that Harvard students do not sufficiently prioritize their coursework. Again, are they wrong? They don't know what students are actually doing all the other hours of the day? Maybe. But again, we teachers can kind of tell. When we're having a discussion in class, can I ask a question and you can't answer it? Like, well, you clearly weren't studying because this was in the textbook or it was from our last lecture, whatever it was. You aren't devoting time outside of class. Or, a student hands in a sloppy paper. Like, yeah, you clearly didn't spend a lot of time on this. Or I told you to go to the tutoring center and I know you didn't. So you're not spending time outside of class. So teachers have a pretty good gauge of who's spending time outside of class doing their coursework. The faculty who are most concerned about workload are the ones who teach in reading intensive disciplines. Faculty in the humanities, interpretive social sciences report that they've had to trim some readings and drop others entirely, that they've had to switch from novels to short stories, and that it's difficult to keep assigning reading in the face of increasing student complaints. So this has been the topic of the last year regarding reading, that college students can't read, they don't devote any time to it. Even if they do, they're bad at it. Literacy is plummeting. Even just reading for fun, they don't do that either. So I would agree with this, that the disciplines that are reading intensive, like English, like philosophy, political science, probably history, the humanities, that is very different than doing math problems for homework. Like once you finish the math, it's done. Whereas reading an entire novel takes a while. So again, if the faculty are having to trim this down, well, it's clear that the students aren't spending a lot of time outside of class, because if they were, they would get the reading done. So when students say, oh, I'm spending more time than ever outside of class doing my homework, it's like, well, then how come the faculty are having to trim the readings down? Because they know you're not doing it. So they're trying to get you to do something. But of course, reading a short story is faster than reading a novel. So that obviously that takes less time. So they're trying to have it both ways here, where it's like, I'm studying so much outside of class, I don't have any time. I'm working so hard. And then the teachers are like, yeah, I know you're not actually doing the reading, so I guess I have to trim it down for you. So that means you actually have more free time now. So I'm not sure of the logic of the data here. It's hard to tell who's being honest. As someone in the humanities, I would tend to agree with these other faculty members that, yeah, man, I can tell you're not doing the reading. I can tell you're not spending time writing the papers. It's obvious. Another interesting twist on this, a fair number of students in reading intensive courses report doing lower than the average hours of work outside of class, and they might be well encouraged to do more comprehensive final exams and reading quizzes. But another factor also seems to be in play. Students are coming to us because of changes in high school education, because of changes in our media culture, with less experience reading complex prose and less capacity for focus and sustained attention. Reference to the latest NEAP report that came out that everyone was talking about. Little surprise then that students struggle with readings that students completed with ease just 10 years ago, or that faculty perceive them to be putting in less time than they are. So again, now we're at the high school stuff. Like, yeah, this is the chain effect that's happening here, that teachers didn't push you hard enough in 7th and 8th grade. And so you were behind. And so the 9th through 12th grade teachers at the high school level go, oh, you guys are behind. We have to make things easier for you because you can't do stuff. So now we'll make 9th through 12th grade easier. So now somehow they still make it to college, and all the college professors go, oh, your previous teachers didn't push you hard enough, so you're behind again. And so now we have to reduce our standards so that you don't all flunk out. So now everything's easier for you. So younger teachers at the younger levels get a lot of blame, but they also deserve it. Like, you're not holding the standards at the lower grade levels and then through high school. And then they get to us and they're below. And then for a variety of pressures, as we'll talk about in a second, all the standards get reduced. And so, again, this is what it's all about. It's all about standards and the level of rigor. All the other flashy, political, controversial things, yeah, those are things to discuss for sure. But underlying all of it is all the rigor has decreased. Everyone's at a lower level, or at least most students are. And the students are at an actual high level. They're ticked off at all the low level students because they're bringing everything down. So you're not making people happy. You're making everything worse. When you don't have standards, that's what happens. She says, we don't have a problem with workload overall. Our accreditation requires that each 4-credit course entails 12 hours of work. That's all normal stuff. And in general, our courses are not falling far short of that. Again, that's assuming the students are being honest in their reporting of how much time they're spending. The ones that are falling far short should either increase the work they are assigning or do more to encourage students to complete the assigned work. Like, yeah, if you can tell that students are getting high grades in your class, but you also know that they aren't doing the work outside of class, that means your class is too easy. So you need to either give them more work or have better enforcement of the work you do have so that there's an actual consequence for not doing it. So the teachers here are to blame as well, that if the students are actually studying really hard, okay, well then you need to ramp up the requirements of your course. Your course is actually too easy. Or, as I said, there's no punishment for not doing the work. So the next section of the report says, how did we get here? And this section is quite interesting. About half of the faculty surveyed reported that they simply cannot award the grades students have actually earned, while the rest reported that they can do so only with difficulty. Doing so requires burdensome material preparation and rhetorical positioning, one faculty member reported, while another said that it requires considerable strength of character. A third noted that it felt possible only after tenure. Okay, so this is something that is up to each teacher as well as the structure of the administrators above them. Because I was faced with this, especially in my early years as a professor, where I was like, I'm going to have my standards. If you can't do this, you're going to flunk. And I don't really care that you complain about it. I don't care if my bosses don't like it. I'm being honest with my students. I'm giving them the proper information. You are not qualified to be at a B or definitely A level. So the strength of character component is a part of it. And I'm not trying to say I'm holier than thou or something, but like that was my position. I believe in integrity. I believe in honesty. I believe in proper assessment practices, like doing it technically right. And I believe from the broadest possible standpoint, I believe that education at the college level should be very rigorous because we're training you for being a real adult and going out into the world and doing complex, important things. It should be tough. So the standard is here. And so I stuck to that. And thankfully, I had bosses over the years that, at least never to my face, ever threatened me by saying, you need to go easier on your students or we're going to let you go. I never had that. So that was a positive. But I knew I was going to get bad evaluations from students because they thought I was too tough when I wasn't. I was just having a standard. That's all that is. But yeah, you got to have a strength of character. You can't bend to the anger of a student or to the pressure from an administrator because I was ready to walk. I knew every time I had an evaluation and maybe a boss had some concerns before because, again, students thought I was too mean or whatever, I was always prepared that if you tell me that I need to lower my standards and start giving out more A's, I'm walking. I'm not working at this place. And again, thankfully that never happened. So some of this might be teachers are just afraid of something that's not necessarily real. Perhaps there are administrators out there who are threatening their faculty saying, you better raise your scores or else, or the grades you give, or else we're going to fire you. That might be true. Again, it could just be in the teachers' minds, but I was aware of it, that was a possibility. And I didn't let that deter me. I was going to say, nope. I believe in standards. I'm doing them. If you don't like it, I'll go to another school. And so, again, thankfully it never came to that, but that was the strength of character component that this one faculty said. It requires burdensome material preparation and rhetorical positioning. That's true. But I was always very prepared with my materials and my rhetoric. The explanations I gave for my students, like, there's no way you're going to refute this. Okay. So you can come complain to me all you want, but I'm not budging on this because this is the right thing. And I've explained myself. You knew what the standards were coming into this assignment. I graded you according to those standards. I'm not trying to trick you. There's no mystery here. I've provided feedback for you. I've given you all the information and evidence you need to know why I gave the judgment I did. As a PhD professor who's an expert in this field, I believe I have the right to determine what I believe is adequate work or not. And here's my explanation. So, like, that's the rhetorical part and the materials part. Like, I have all the rubrics, I have all the explanation, I have all the data that shows what I'm doing is accurate. So what are you going to complain about? So again, is that a burden? Yeah, because you have to be prepared, but that's also just called being a good teacher. You need to have the reasoning and the evidence for why you give grades you give. And then, like I said, the strength of character to stand by them and not get pushed around by either the students or their parents or your administrators. What makes grading so difficult? Some of the pressure comes from other faculty. Faculty don't grade in isolation. They know that their assignments will be perceived as demanding and that they're grading as tough, not on their own terms, but in relation to what other faculty are doing. That's true. No one wants to be an outlier. I didn't care about that. I didn't care if everyone thought, oh, that's Dr. Spivey guy. He's a tough teacher. I didn't care if my faculty thought. I wanted my faculty to think that because then I wanted them to come up to my level. So I wanted, in fact, again, this isn't to brag, it's just to say the reality of it. And maybe there was opposition to this, but many, many times over my career, when it got out that, oh, Dr. Spivey, he's a tough grader, he has high standards in his classes, I had many professors come to me in secret and say, hey, you know what? The high standards you have, I'm going to start doing that in my class too. And they were scared to do that before because they thought, oh, I don't want to be the mean teacher. If I, like we just said in the previous paragraph, I'm going to get in trouble if I have my standards too high. But they saw that I was doing it, that I don't care what students think of me, that thankfully I had a really great boss who supported everything I did and stood by my rigor. And they saw, oh, yeah, nothing bad happens when you have standards. So I want high standards too. That'll make our school better. So let's do that. And so they started doing it. And then another faculty did it. Another faculty come to me, hey, I was scared of doing this before, but now I'm starting to have higher standards and it's really going great. Like, yeah, man, that's the whole point. So when it says no one wants to be an outlier, I wanted to be the outlier to show all the other people, you can do this. You can be as tough as I am. And nothing bad's going to happen. In fact, it'll make everything better. Our school will have a better reputation if we're tougher. And then there won't be an outlier because we'll all be tough and it'll be great. The students may not like it, but at least the students who care and actually are successful, they'll know they earned it instead of getting the fake grades that the students already know they're getting. So I have no problem being an outlier. It just takes a little bit of character, like the previous paragraph said. Faculty also know that they are competing with one another for students. This is also true. With good enrollments come guaranteed teaching for graduate students, the possibility of more faculty lines for departments, and the opportunity to introduce students to the subjects we've devoted our lives to studying. It makes sense in this context for faculty to lower standards in order to raise enrollments. Grading at Harvard is in a race to the bottom, one faculty member observed. That's exactly right, and all schools are a race to the bottom because, again, it gets out as well among the cities and the states and just in the world of education that certain schools are easier and you can get high grades and you can get your diploma faster and easier and more convenient and all the buzzwords, more efficient, all this stuff. And so that's where the kids want to go. So it's a race to the bottom for almost every school. Within the school, it's also true. But again, this is where faculty have to talk to each other. And I'm going to talk about that here shortly. But that I believe in academic freedom. I believe in teachers having their own way of doing things. Like, you're the expert in your field. You figure it out. But it does help a lot if there's some continuity across departments and even across the whole school where everyone can say, we are all doing this. And we all agree that this is the level we should be at. Because, again, the students notice the discrepancies. The students know, oh, that department's easier than this department. That teacher's easier than this one. That class is easier than this one. And they adjust accordingly. And so then, again, especially, this is the case for adjuncts, but even for full-time faculty, for adjuncts, there's never a guarantee that you're even going to have a class. And so you start thinking, well, I want the kids to like me so that they sign up for my class, because if I don't, then I don't have a job. And I don't get paid for that course. So I better give the kids what they want so they stay and I get my paycheck. Well, if you're tenured, you might not have to worry about that. But even other faculty member, I had to deal with that, even though I wasn't an adjunct. As a full-time faculty department chair, I had to constantly think, okay, what if no one signs up for my class because they think I'm too hard? What am I going to do? Well, I would then have to adjust and take other classes and, maybe courses I didn't really want to teach or wasn't comfortable teaching, or there were better people to do it or whatever. Like, I would have to do those because, I'm a full-timer. I need a class to teach. So I also think one way I recommended this to my administrators, and they shot it down, but a way to fix this problem, because I saw this happening years ago. I said, well, don't put the teacher's name on the sign-up sheet. The student won't know what class it is until they show up that day on the first day of class. So like, take the whatever knowledge they have beforehand about that teacher or their assumptions about that teacher, take it off the table. Just say, here's English 101. It's at 9 a.m. That's what you're signing up for. And then you show up that day and you're like, oh, that's my teacher. Uh-oh. And then you're stuck because all the classes are filled up. You can't transfer in and out because they're already full. So like, you have to just take that class and deal with it. Well, that would bring more equality among all the classes, because then you wouldn't have to worry about this kids the kids picking certain teachers because they're easier. Take it off the table. My administrators and other staffers were like, no, the kids need to know, they deserve to know, they have the right to know who the teachers are and all that stuff. I was like, that's stupid, because this is the incentive you're creating. You're creating an opportunity for them to just pick the easiest teachers. Now, the good students still came to my class because they're like, I want to learn from him. And so that was fine. But those were the good students. The bad students, which there were many, would just avoid the tougher teachers. So that's what happens. Race to the bottom is exactly right. Talking about evaluations, in 2008, they voted to formalize the process of evaluations. Instructors worry a great deal about their scores on these. Teaching fellows and non-ladder faculty feel that low scores will limit their job prospects, while tenure-track faculty fear that low scores will damage their tenure chances. Again, this is all stupid. You should never take kids. Like, why would you trust a 19-year-old to evaluate a class from a professor with a PhD who's been doing this for 20 years? Like, what possible information can you possibly get from a kid who doesn't know anything, and they have the right to say, that's a bad teacher, or that's a good teacher? They don't know anything. Why are you even listening to them? Their student evaluations are so dumb, which is why I never looked at them. I don't care what kids say. I know what I do, and if I want feedback, I'll go talk to my best students and ask them. And because they're good students, they'll tell me the truth, and I'll tell them, hey, tell me the truth. And those are conversations that are valuable, because the good students and I are on the same page, and I want to have good classes. You never listen to all the students. That makes no sense. Nor are tenured faculty immune, since they feel responsible for drawing undergraduates in their concentrations. Again, I knew that was part of my deal too. Is like, well, I know if I'm trying to recruit kids to come be English majors, but everyone knows it's really tough, am I going to not have enough majors? And then is the school going to cancel my program? I mean, that's all a fear, but again, you just got to go find good students who are actually willing to do the work. These concerns shape grading, even though grading has only a small predictive power for evaluation scores, and workload has no predictive power at all. Faculty nonetheless believe that the grades they award and the work they assign determine the scores they receive. So maybe that's true. It's hard to tell. Students also exert pressure on grading. Sometimes the pressure is direct, as when some students challenge their grades or take an increasingly litigious approach to every assignment. That's definitely true. At other times, the pressure is indirect, with some advisors advocating inappropriately on students' behalf. This is what I said, where like an advisor will either direct a student away from you, or an advisor might email you and go, hey, I have a student who has some concerns about their grades. Like, you should not even talk to that person. You're like, you're not in my class. You don't know what's going on here. This is between me and the student and our syllabus that clearly describes all of this. So you don't know what's going on here. This is not your deal. So that's an easy fix too. But staff members do that sometimes. Driving this pressure are very real, if exaggerated, concerns. On the one hand, students are right that their grades will play a role in determining whether they are admitted to medical school or law school or get a desirable internship. On the other hand, they tend to overestimate what GPA is actually required for these goals and underestimate the number of paths open to them. Their strong, if only partially accurate, fears make it difficult for faculty to award the grades that have been earned. Couple important points there. Yes, when there's this constant focus on grades, you get the students who want to quibble over every single little point. And I'm going to share an article with you here in a bit about what has made that worse in recent years. And it's just so funny that over time, students, they think they can, like, they think they have the right to complain about this stuff. When I was in college and even in grad school as an adult, never once did it ever cross my mind, ever, to go to a teacher, one of my professors, and complain about a grade, and to think and to advocate that I should have gotten a higher grade. I never once would have thought that. Again, I'm old, I'm from the 90s, so that was just the way it was. I assumed, well, the professors are way smarter than I am, obviously. And so their evaluation of me, whether I agree with it or not, is what I just have to deal with. And maybe I don't like it, but they're the boss. I have no say in this. And maybe that was the wrong interpretation on my part of my role as a student. I don't know. But I always felt like they're the teacher, I'm the student. What they say goes. And now, granted, there are a lot of bad teachers who give a lot of unfair grades, maybe, and maybe I should have spoken up sometimes. I don't know, but I never even would have thought of it. And now today, students complain about everything, and they constantly go, "Well, I should have gotten a higher grade." I'm like, "Oh, really?" And I wouldn't always say this, but my thinking was like, "Oh, so you're an expert in English, are you? So you have a PhD? You've been a professor for 20 years? You think you know more about this than I do, really?" Again, I wouldn't say that, but that would be what was going on in my brain. I'm like, where do you get the guts to come and talk to me that you think I graded you wrongly? Now, if there's an actual mistake, and this is a little easier to fix on like multiple choice tests where it's like you go over the test and the answer is B and you accidentally marked it wrong. And they go, "I thought you said the answer was B and I put B. So can you clarify?" And I go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I don't know why I did that. That's stupid." And in those situations, I would often give the student bonus points because I was like, "Well, I made the mistake. I'll give you a little bit more of a bonus for even catching it." But on a paper, it's like, no, I went over this. I evaluated it properly. There's no confusion here. What I gave you is the grade. No more. There's no dispute about this. See you in class. We're not talking about this anymore. The entitlement, where students think, well, I deserve to know why I got this grade. And again, teachers give you the evidence, but I deserve to argue for a higher grade. No, that's not how this goes. The last point that was made there is an important one, and this is what I would always talk about on the first day of class, is you shouldn't be worried about your grades. Okay, the grades don't really matter. Yes, in certain situations they do. If you are positive you're going to graduate school, yep, they're going to look at your transcripts. Maybe if you're going to be a teacher, they might look at your transcripts. But most people don't. I said, my wife, she's gone, we graduated 25 years ago. Never once in any of the jobs she's had in 25 years has anyone ever asked her, "Hey, what was your GPA in college?" No one cares. If they care at all, they care that you have a diploma, that you graduated. But that's it. They want to know, did you make it through? Okay, fine. That's enough. But no one's ever going to ask you for your transcripts. No one cares that you got a C in your English 101 class. Like, no one cares about that. So why are you caring about it? Your job is to do the best you can, put forth as much effort to learn as much and become as skilled as you possibly can over these next 16 weeks. That's all your goal should be. And whatever happens with the grades. It doesn't really matter because no one's going to care. What matters is how smart you are and how skilled you are. So focus on that and the grades will take care of themselves. And I know that message is hard for a 19-year-old to hear, but that was what I tried to get across to them every single semester because they would pull that, same thing we were just talking about of quibbling over every little thing. And I'd be like, stop it. I don't want to have this argument with you. First of all, there's no argument here, but also it doesn't matter. Just do a good job. It'll all work out in the end. I promise. It'll take care of itself. But students they don't really think like that. They think, I want the numbers to prove that I have a high grade. Another kind of pressure comes from the college itself. For the past decade or so, the college has been exhorting faculty to remember that some students arrive less prepared for college than others, that some are struggling with difficult family situations or other challenges, that many are struggling with imposter syndrome. That's one of the dumbest phrases that's ever emerged in the last few years because everyone said, "Oh, I have imposter syndrome." Stop it. That's not even a thing. Forget it. Nearly all are suffering from stress, of course. Like kids from previous years weren't stressed. Like, again, as I've said 1,000 times on this, on other podcasts, you're no different from all the other kids. I had a job when I was in school too. I played a sport when I was in school too. I had all sorts of things that went on too. Yeah, it's stressful. You got to deal with it. That's normal. Stop thinking that you're a unique case. You're just a normal college kid. Deal with it. Faculty have taken these exhortations to heart. Unsure how best to support their students, many have simply become more lenient. Requirements were relaxed and grades were raised, particularly in the year of remote instruction. This leniency, while well-intentioned, has had pernicious effects. Not only has it contributed to grade compression and inflation, it has also undermined our educational mission. There's been what one faculty member describes as a radical shift from providing critical feedback to providing emotional support. Exactly. Many faculty would like to revise that shift. They want to return to to doing the hard work, but necessary work that is providing real feedback. They fear, though, that students would complain, and they wonder whether the administration would, as several put it, have their backs. All true. As students beg for sympathy. "Oh, I've just been so stressed. Oh, I was busy last night. I didn't get any sleep. That's why I did so badly on the test." Everything is, my grandma died 4 times this semester. That's why I had to be gone for 4 funerals. No, this is all taking advantage of teachers. And teachers have, back to that strength of character part, have just wimped out. They don't say, "Yeah, if that's a real problem, I sympathize with you, but we all have problems and you need to do the job. So turn in your homework on time," or "This paper needs to be cleaner," or "You need to study harder for that test." Whatever it is, you just have to overcome it. Instead of being so lenient, which now goes, okay, I'll cut you some slack. I was going to give you a B, but now I'll give you an A. Or I was going to give you a D, which looks really bad, but now I'll give you a C. Or I was going to flunk you, but I'll give you a D so you at least pass. Like, the leniency is, again, it's not giving the proper information to the student. The student needs to hear, here's the standard. You either do it or you don't. If you don't, there's a consequence. So just deal with that. But we don't. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, I'll give you another week. I'll give you another week to turn that paper in. Oh, I'll give you a second chance. Let's do a retake of the test. No, that's all ridiculous. And to be honest, one of the reasons I left my previous university was I got a note from the vice president, the new vice president, who sent an email to everybody. I kept the email. I still have it. That said, we need to start being more lenient. Don't mark them down for missing class. Give them second chances. Offer extra credit. I was like, oh, this is where the school's going. I'm out, and I left because I'm not being a part of that nonsense. So this is happening everywhere. You would think you wouldn't need to do this at Harvard because these are already smart kids. But if this is happening at Harvard, you can only imagine how bad it is at all the other schools with just regular kids, because this is happening everywhere. This is not unique to Harvard. A final factor influencing grading is a new approach to teaching. Almost 20 years ago, the Compact to Enhance Teaching and Learning at Harvard called on this organization to reward excellence, probably the administrators, I guess, to reward excellence in teaching and advising and to improve pedagogy and student learning. It's like, okay, well, you should have been doing that already. But so they started this initiative. In the years since then, faculty have more than met this call. We have focused more attention on our teaching, and many of us have redesigned our courses to increase learning. Except you just said they cut their reading requirements to give students more time. So I don't know. Some of these changes, however, have had unintended consequences. For instance, many of us shifted from high-stakes exams to more frequent lower-stakes assignments, believing that this would help students retain the material. A number have found, however, that lower-stakes assignments are more effective at rewarding effort than at evaluating performance, giving students the false sense that they had mastered material that still eludes them. Similarly, faculty shifted from exams and papers to alternate modes of assessment, such as creative assignments and group projects, in the hopes of increasing student engagement with their courses. A number struggled, however, to assess these assignments in a sufficiently differentiated way. Finally, some faculty have eschewed conventional grading, turning instead to ungrading or contract-based learning, horrible, or other systems in which students earn A's for completing all assigned work. That's a participation trophy. Oh, you just did the work? Okay, you get an A. Doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that the work is any good. As long as you did it, I'll give you an A. It's the lowest bar possible. There is a pedagogical case to be made for these alternate approaches. I don't really think so, but they're fundamentally at odds with our current grading system, which relies on grades to differentiate. Key things here. It's funny that these ideas became called excellence in teaching and advising when these are all really bad ideas. I believe in low stakes assignments. Again, you kind of got to check in with your kids on a fairly frequent basis to see that they're keeping up with littler things. And then you can worry about the big assignments later. But if those are too many, then yeah, the kids can just do all of the low level stuff well and bomb the big stuff and still do well in the class. Well, that's bad. You can't do that. And I've had to deal with that. And that's why you assess yourself each semester, because I've had to look back at grades and I go, you know what? I think I had too many low level points. And so it actually raised kids' grades higher than they should have been. By the end of the semester, that kid was still not a good writer. They just did all the low level assignments, but on their papers, they got bad grades. So I probably need to shift that in the other direction. And so you just keep honing that. But yeah, switching to group work and all this nonsense, that doesn't help the students learn, okay? The right thing to do here, and again, it took me 20 years to know this through trial and error and just figuring out how students' brains work. But what you do is you have, the light keeps shining in my face. What you do is you have more high stakes assessments. And so that's what I did in my class, is because that's sort of the balance between, every assignment we do is important. You cannot get a bad grade on these assignments, but I'm going to give you enough of them that if you do poorly on one, you can make up for it. So in my class, we would write 6 papers, all right? In my composition courses anyway, six essays. We might still have little teeny tiny points to be earned along the way. I might have a quick quiz here and there just to give you a chance to, again, for me to assess how you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but also to earn back a few points, but not have it be so many that it overwhelms what the class is actually about, which is writing papers. And so, yeah, was it more grading for me because I assigned 6 essays during the semester? Yes, but it was a much more accurate reflection of how the students are doing from a writing standpoint, because that's what the class is, it's writing, than doing a bunch of other activities or having more low-level activities or having fewer big papers. Because there'd be some teachers like, well, we have 3 papers this semester. It's like, yeah, but does that give students enough learning opportunities and enough feedback from you to genuinely improve their writing? I always said no. I think you need much more practice, and so we did again about 6 essays in those classes, and so there was really no fluff. There's no way you can just do the low-level stuff and raise your grade by a lot. You might raise your grade a few points, but not a lot. You have to do well on the things that matter, which are the papers. And so the answer, they keep going one or the other. Like, oh, is it the big assessments, or should we do more small scale assessments? Like, well, the answer is in the middle. You need more big scale of assessments. You need more big tests that are more valuable. Instead of having, just a midterm and a final, it's like, yeah, that's not necessarily that fair to students, I don't think, even though that's been kind of the norm for many decades. I think students do have the opportunity to improve over time. And so you need to give them chances to improve. Now, not so many chances that they can just accumulate so many points that they end up getting a B or a higher just because they did all the work. You need to see genuine improvement. And the way you see improvement is on big assessments. So big formal papers, big exams, big projects or presentations. The small assessments, again, you can do a few of them, but that's not really where you do the actual assessment. It's just not. Students shouldn't be blamed for pursuing A's so avidly, nor faculty for awarding them so frequently. Sure, I mean, most kids want A's, and teachers, even tough teachers like me, like I want to give you an A. I just want you to earn it properly. That's all. Both groups are operating reasonably within a system structured by competing incentives and a culture animated by evolving beliefs about what students need and what good teaching entails. We must change that system and culture if we want grading to change. Yeah, again, it's about incentives. If your incentive for your students is, at the university level, is get them in the door, so they pay their tuition dollars and they graduate, which is what administrators mostly care about. They don't even care about the graduation part, to be honest. They care about getting them in the door and making them pay, because administrators want money. They don't care about the grading stuff. They want money. So that's the incentive. It's like, well, if you pass that down to the teachers and the staff members, they're like, okay, well, let's lower our standards to get as many kids in. That will raise revenue. And then hopefully a lot of them will stay, and so they graduate, and that looks kind of good for our graduation rate. Okay, fine, done. Well, the way to do that is lower your standards on the admissions and lower your standards on the classes, which lowers the standards for graduation. Everyone wins, right? Your numbers all worked out. You got a bunch of money for it. Sounds great. Yeah, except the kids didn't learn anything. That's the problem. So it depends on the incentives. What are your incentives? Harvard might be different than other universities, but if I were Harvard, which is what I think UATX is doing, University of Austin, is you should say, we are taking only the best and the brightest in this country. Okay, so you're limited enrollment, which they kind of already do. But then it should be, and while you're here, you're going to do the most difficult work of any college student in the entire nation. That's how hard it's going to be. Well, you might get accepted here, but actually many of you are going to drop out because it's too hard. That's what we're doing here at Harvard, because that's what it means to be elite. That's what I think Harvard should do. And I think I think UATX is probably striving for that too. Like, here's our standard. We're only letting students in who meet this standard, and while you're here, you are going to get pushed because we want you to be the best. Well, right now, they kind of passed the first threshold. It's like, okay, you made it here, great. And then the kids are finding out, oh, while I'm here, I actually don't have to do that much. I can still get an A. Great. Well, now your academic reputation is in the toilet. So that's a problem. So I always compare things to other fields. I've used this comparison before, but like this especially fits with Harvard or MIT or Stanford or any of these other great institutions that are supposed to be the highest quality. Again, have the high threshold for getting in, but you should be like the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs are actively trying to kick you out. They're trying to get you to quit. That's their goal. That's why like 75% of people flunk out. They can't cut it. They quit. So then the people who graduate and become actual Navy SEALs, and someone introduces themselves to you and go, oh yeah, I was a Navy SEAL for 20 years. You go, oh, okay, you're legit. You're one of the toughest people on this planet. I know exactly who you are. Yeah, because you went through the most rigorous thing you could imagine. And so there's no confusion about your intelligence or your skills, depending on that thing. In the case of Navy SEALs, like, okay, we know you're an amazing soldier. I don't have to have any questions about it. You've earned it. There's no doubt about, well, did you really earn it? Did you slide by? Were your instructors too nice to you? I'm not quite sure. Did you really pass that assessment? No, you know that if you made it, you made it. And everyone acknowledges it. So like, why can't Harvard be that way? Like, okay, you got into Harvard, but while you're here, we're actually going to try to make you drop out of Harvard. That's our goal. Because we want the Harvard name to be one where everyone, when you say, yeah, I graduated from Harvard, here's my diploma with my name on it, everyone goes, holy cow, you must be one of the smartest people in the world. Because that place, almost nobody finishes that place. Well, then you'd have a reputation that's to be proud of. That would be great. It's just like, again, same thing. I talk about the military, I talk about sports, because these are areas that have real consequences. Same thing in sports. Like, you don't get to be a bad athlete and make it on a Division I basketball team. You just don't. That's not how it works. Okay? If when you try out for the team, they are actively trying to find ways to get rid of you because they want the best 12 guys in the country on their team. If you're playing at UConn or Gonzaga or any of the high level programs, okay? That's what they're doing. They don't go, well, yeah, we'll let you on and yeah, we'll let you play and you'll get a lot of playing time just like all the other guys do. They go, no, no, no. One, we don't even want you on the team if you're not good enough. And two, even if you make the team, it's going to be so difficult that you might want to quit, or at the your best option is you get to sit on the bench. Because we only play the best people here. They're the ones who get in the games. And they're the ones who determine if we're going to become national champs. That's the level we're aiming at. And so everyone wants to go. When Nick Saban was the coach at Alabama, why do you think they were so good and they got every single top recruit? Because everyone wants to work for the best or play for the best. And that's what they did. So it's like the high level programs in sports, in the military, they get it. You want to be excellent? It's not that hard. You limit your enrollment. Or if you have an open enrollment, like, you can go into the military, anyone can join the military. But like once you're there, they're trying to get you to drop out because if you're not tough enough, you can't be there. No one's going to trust you. I'm not going to send you into battle to save your friends' lives if you can't do the stuff. So get out of here. So if you want to be an elite school, like Harvard says it is, and I would say even if you're a low-level school, that should be the mentality because college should be different than K through 12. Just like the Navy SEALs are different than the general army you go into or whatever. Like, they're different. So let's make it different. It's elite. If you want to be an Army Ranger, you want to be a Green Beret, you want to be a Navy SEAL, that's different than all the other soldiers. Harvard is supposed to be different than all the other schools. So be different. You handing A's to everybody doesn't make you different. It makes you exactly like every other school that's out there right now because they're all doing it. So it's the incentives. Yeah, what culture? Culture animated by evolving beliefs. No. There's no evolving beliefs, especially when you're an elite institution like Harvard. It doesn't evolve because your one belief is we're the best. Here's the standard. This does not change. We constantly strive to be elite every semester. There's no evolution of that. You either do it or you don't. It's so weird that we haven't figured this out. So, third part, what should we do about this? Lots of advice here. Let me just go over a couple things. And what's ironic or weird about this is that these are things that every school should already be doing. And if you're not doing these at Harvard, yeah, that's a big problem. So one, review the distribution of grades this is what faculty should do. Review the distribution of grades in their courses over time. It's like, yeah, you should do that. If you as a department are looking at your program and going, boy, 10 years ago, there was much more of an even distribution in our program, and now everyone's getting A's. That's something we really need to address. Perhaps we should get together as faculty in our department and talk about what we're teaching and the materials we're using and all that stuff to crank up the rigor because it seems like things are getting too easy right now. And it's very obvious that students aren't getting smarter. So something must be happening within us that the grades have changed. So let's work on that. So yeah, you review how the grades have gone over previous semesters. I do that as a department chair for many years. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would look at all the grades, both for my own classes and all the faculty I was in charge of. And I'd say, okay, how have the grades been going over the last few years? Are we skewing too high? If it's only certain teachers, do I just need to go talk to those teachers and say, hey, let's have a discussion about grading? Is it all of us? Are things getting lower? Is that because our teachers are grading too hard, or is it because our students are just worse? You got to examine this stuff. You can't just assume everything should stay the same over time because this is how you know if you're on the right track or not. So reviewing the distribution of grades, basic stuff. Review their assignments and the relative weight of each. Again, this is what I just said a minute ago with how many big assignments you have versus how many small level assignments you have. I've had to do this in the past where I adjusted those. I thought, I'm actually doing too many low level assignments. I need to get back to the high level ones. So yeah, this isn't hard to do. Faculty individually should do this. I did this individually, but I also did it with my department. So this is something that is, again, both an individual thing as well as a group departmental thing. And maybe the whole faculty should be getting together to do that stuff. Articulating their grading standards. Yeah, do you not, are your standards not clear? Mine are always very clear. Faculty should explain to students what each grade represents. Our students don't know what constitutes excellence or extraordinary work in a discipline. Indeed, they may not even know what the quality of the work is, which grades are evaluating. Okay, so in my classes, I would show my students an A paper. I'd say, this is what an A looks like. Okay, so let's go through it. What makes this an A paper? And we would talk it through just about the writing stuff, and then I would show them the rubric, and I would go, okay, so on the rubric, here's what made this an A paper. Look at the requirements. Let's go through it. Okay, here's its argument. Here's all the things it did really well. Okay, great. Here's its structure. Here's all the things it did well. Here's the grammar. Notice how there's no grammar errors in this whole paper. Okay, this is why it's an A paper, not only because it's good writing, but because it matches the rubric that we use in this class. So we go over that in my classes. And so the students, and then often I would have students actually practice with it. And so I would keep old papers from the past, and I would hand them out to students and say, okay, here's 5 essays. Grade them. What grades do you think these deserve? And here's the rubric we're going to use in this class. So here's the key. Now you be the teacher. Pretend you're the teacher, and let's see how you do. And they would write down the grades, and then we would talk about it. What did you get? Oh, you said that grade was a 79. Okay, what about you guys? An 84. Okay, 98. Okay, wow. And then we go, why did you think it was so low? Why did you think it was so high? And we would discuss, and I would say, okay, now here's the grade I actually gave this last year when this kid turned this in this class. Here it is on the board. And then we would see which students were on the right track using the rubric correctly and which students were way off. And we do that for 4 or 5 papers. So they got in the habit of noticing, okay, this is what the teacher is looking for. This is what the rubric requires. This is what a good paper looks and sounds like. We practice it. So when we talk about articulating your grading standards, like, what teacher isn't doing that? Now, for a writing class, that's one way because I have a model to show you. This is what the product looks like. For a class that's just content-based and you're just taking multiple choice tests, you don't really have a model necessarily, but what you can do is you can walk through the questions or types of questions that you ask on your tests, and you can clearly say, as I always did I didn't give tests very often, but when I did, I would say, look, the only things that are going to appear on the test are things we actually talked about in class, okay? So even if it's in the textbook, I asked you to read that chapter. If we didn't actually talk about it in class, I'm not going to put that as a test question. Not to say you shouldn't read the book, but the book and the lecture are going to reinforce each other. And so you'll always know what I'm going to test you on. It's the stuff we talked about in class. There's never any tricks. I'm not hiding anything from you, but I also don't do study guide stuff or like, these are the types of questions I'm going to ask you. No, that's dumb because then the students ignore everything else. You want them to know that everything's important, especially the stuff you actually go over in class. That makes them want to come to class, and it makes them pay attention in class because they know this stuff could be on a test someday. So then you say, okay, well, here's a type of question I'm going to ask, and here's how I set up my multiple choices, because there's a rule for how you should build a proper multiple choice test. Anyone who's a good teacher knows that. And so then the students know, okay, when I'm taking this test, I know that it's going to be based on this material. I know it's probably something he emphasized in class. I know when he sets up his questions, he's probably looking for, he's trying to differentiate between these types of students. So if I want to be a top student, I need to be looking for these types of answers. Yeah, you can walk through that with your students. That's what you should do. Again, if you're a teacher who doesn't, well, then you're a bad teacher. So at Harvard, maybe they don't have very good teachers. Maybe they have really great scholars. I'm sure they're all brilliant people there, but maybe they're not good teachers. Have better teachers. Calibrate grading across sections of a course. Okay, so this is an important one too. Again, I believe in academic freedom. I believe in teachers being allowed to run their class the way they want to run their class. But in my department, I always said, we're going to do things one way. And within that way, I'll give you a little wiggle room because you're the boss of your class. But we have to be on the same page here because we can't have students, as we said previously, who go, oh, I'm going to sign up for that teacher because she's easier than she is. And I want an easy grade and don't want to take her. We can't have that. We have to have students know that whichever class they pick, this is how it's going to be graded. It's going to be following these rules. And so we got together every year as the chair and the people I hired, I got together with them and I said, okay, let's do with what I did with my students a few minutes ago. Here's some essays from a previous class. Grade these. Let me hear what you think. And then I would say, here's how I graded them. Here's why my way is the right way. And here's how we're going to do this in all of our classes this semester. And they would get on board with it. And now every student in the entire school who took our classes, because it was gen ed English classes, they all knew, here's what those teachers are looking for. There isn't much of a difference between the teachers. There are no easy teachers. Everyone's the same. And I know that when the teacher assesses me, I have no room to complain because all the teachers assess that way. That's the way we do it. So yeah, you calibrate the grading across the sections of a course so that they're as similar as possible. Again, it's not going to be exact, but we practice this. I had my faculty practice it with me, so it's not hard. There are also steps the faculty can take collectively. Some departments have already come together to articulate grading standards for their own concentrations, which is what I just said, while the faculty teaching large gateway courses have met to discuss their grading as well. Other groups might follow their example, perhaps all faculty teaching creative courses, or all faculty teaching language courses, or all faculty overseeing junior tutorials. So yeah, you can do this in your own specific department. You can do it with your class sections. You can do it in your school of arts and sciences or whatever your designation is, or you can do it across the whole university. I did this for my whole university. So every year, not always every semester, but every year, I would volunteer to teach a professional development seminar at the beginning of this, before the semester started, where all faculty came in, and many times we would do what I just explained. I would hand out papers, and I would say, what grade would you give it? And we would have a big discussion among all faculty on, oh, you thought this was a 72. You thought this was an 85. Well, that's an entire grade difference. Why was this a B and this a C? Let's discuss. And then I would say, well, actually, I gave this a 68. This is a D paper. So neither of you are right. So let's get on the same page of why this is a D paper, so that in their classes, even if they taught history or even a science class where they were writing a paper, I want you grading like we grade in the English department, so that there's uniformity across campus, so that everyone knows this is what good writing looks like. And most teachers are on board with that. Sometimes they would fight against it. I would often meet teachers that are like, well, I only care about the content. I just want to know what their argument was. I'm like, oh, so you're okay with a paper having 50 grammar errors? Why would you think that's okay for adults? These are adult students. They shouldn't have 50 grammar errors. They shouldn't even have 5 grammar errors. Why are you accepting errors? Well, I don't really care about that. I care about the argument. No. Writing, and then I'd have a seminar on here's what writing is. Writing is equal parts argument, structure, and grammar. They all three need to work together. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So in my English curriculum stuff, I have it, and I can share it with you if you want. But it's not hard to do, and I did it for my whole school. So what are some possible solutions they're thinking? They've got to be a little more creative to try and solve this problem, because otherwise, it's just going to keep perpetuating itself, especially at a large school. There's always going to be these. It's hard to get everyone on board. So what's some policies they could do? Well, allowing faculty to award a limited number of A pluses. I think that's pretty crazy. Like, I don't know why you need an A plus designation. That seems kind of silly. But they're saying, well, if you limited that to just a few, like these are the kids who really separated themselves from the other A's. It's like, well, yeah, maybe, except what if you have a lot of kids who actually deserve an A plus? I mean, that's not really fair to them. I mean, sometimes there are classes where you have a lot of really smart kids in them. So why don't they deserve the grade? That's why just having a straight standard is better off. But you could do that. Recording the median grade for every course on the transcript. So that's a pretty good idea. I don't think it's perfect, but where you say, this kid got an A in my class. The median for the class was a C. And so anyone looking at it goes, oh, you got an A in a class where everyone else got a C. Okay, you must be pretty bright. Meanwhile, if the median score in your class was an A, then the person reading the transcript goes, wait a minute, you got an A in a class where everyone got an A? Well, that doesn't really tell me that you're very smart. It sounds like that class was too easy, so I don't know if you actually learned anything. So that's a pretty good way of doing it. There's flaws with it as well, though, because as I said, there are just some classes that you happen to have a lot of bright students in them, where maybe the course average is an A, because you teach a class of 15 kids and 12 of them are actual A students. Well, you don't want to punish kids just because they happen to be in a smart class that year, because the opposite also happens. I'd have classes, I would teach in the single day. My one class would have many students who are top level students. The very next hour teaching the same class, the new crop of students would come in, second section of the day, and all those kids would be terrible. So it's like, well, the median shifts. Like, it's the same class. I'm teaching the same way, same materials, same assignments, but it's the population that's different. So even that's not perfect, because I mean, maybe you could do it for the whole department. That might be good. But for each course, that doesn't necessarily work, because in that class, I got an A and the median was a D. Someone could look at it and go, oh, well, wow, you must be way brighter than all those other kids. Like, well, yeah, maybe, or you could just be a normal A student and everyone else was dummies. So like it can be inaccurate on both ends. You could have a really smart class or a really bad class, and that's going to skew the average for the transcript. So a couple different grading systems. All in all, we must make sure that our review process rewards teaching that is rigorous as well as meaningful, and that our enrollment expectations are reasonable and clear. So yeah, this could be fixed at the entry level. When you say our enrollment expectation is you are one of the best students, if that's our policy, okay, you have to be at this level. And then rewarding teaching that is rigorous as well as meaningful. Well, yeah, what are you rewarding in your class? The fact that they showed up every day? The fact that they kind of did the work fairly well? Or do you have an entire environment of rigor and meaning where everything we do is valuable? We're trying to be the best. And to be the best, yeah, some of you are going to fail because that's how we differentiate the best from everyone else. So that's what we do here. But if that's not part of your mission, if that's not what your school finds meaningful, that we're trying to identify truly elite work here, well then yeah, the kids are going to show up going, well, I want an A. And if you don't give me one, I'm going to just switch to another class where the teacher will. And then if none of you do, I'm going to have my parents who, my father's a high-powered attorney and donates a lot of money to the university. I'm going to have him complain and threaten to withhold donor money. So you better give me an A. Yeah, that's what you've created. Whereas if you tell people up front, this is what we are, while we're here, some of you might not cut it. You're going to take a hike because you don't deserve to be here. Even though you got in the first threshold, good for you. We're going to another level now. You have to go even further now. That's why the Navy SEALs have, yeah, you can try and join the Navy SEALs. If you make it past the first day, you can stay for a little while. But then there's all these levels. There's like a whole bunch of levels that you have to go through all these tests, and you have to get recommendations from your commanding officers. Only the people who get it to the very end, like there's only a few people who make it to the very end, and you know that they actually and legitimately made it. There was no like, well, we'll let him slide. I feel bad for that guy, so let's just let him through. I'll recommend him. No. They do not do that. And we shouldn't do that at Harvard either. If our goal anyway is being an elite university, if it's not, okay, fine. Then your reputation becomes you're a mediocre university. And if you're okay with that, that's your choice. But you can no longer call yourself elite if you don't have rigorous, courses and programs and administrators holding the rigor to account and all that stuff. Other colleges have tried some things. Yale tried some stuff. It didn't really work. Cornell and Dartmouth tried adding more information, publishing median course grades on student transcripts in hopes this would encourage students to take more demanding courses. And only the most dedicated students did so. Yeah, exactly right. And this is why you need to listen to your genuinely top students, because they're the ones who kind of want to do things the right way. Again, at my previous university, this is what I saw, where the best students sought me out. They wanted the best instruction. They wanted the most rigor. They wanted to legitimately feel like they earned a high grade. They wanted to learn the most. And so they took me because I've been doing this a long time and I'm really good at it. So they knew the reputation got out. He's the best. Go talk to him. Go take his class. And so they did. This is what dedicated students do. So then when you have those dedicated students and they're getting an A, but then everyone else is getting an A, yeah, you're harming those dedicated students. They actually are your best markers for how the school is doing. Listen to your best students, not just all the ones who got an A, but you actually have to know your students. And so you should ask your faculty, ask them who are genuine, not just the ones who got an A, genuinely top students. Who's the best student you've had this year? I'll give you a name. Okay, go interview that kid. And then all the other teachers do that. So you have this group of 20 kids, and you ask them, how do you think the school's doing? Are the courses rigorous enough? Tell me about your teachers. Tell me about the assignments. Do you find them meaningful? What do you guys say? What do you guys think about this? Well, they'll be honest with you. And most of the time, again, in my previous school, the administrator didn't want to talk to those kids. They did not care at all because they knew what the kids would say. So they never asked them, even though I would tell them, hey, you should go talk to these kids. They have some interesting ideas about how we could improve the school. Oh, they never did that. Instead, they do a general survey and they give it to all the kids, and then they go, oh, look, everyone likes our school. We're doing great. It's like, no, because you're listening to all the kids who don't care. And they just slid by with grade inflation. Don't ask them. Ask the best students. They'll be honest with you. And at my school, the best students were like, oh, this is not good. The standards are dropping. I see kids getting high scores that shouldn't be. I know I'm doing more work than them, and yet the teachers are really easy on them. The athletes get all the breaks. Like the teachers let them have extra days to do projects and stuff. Like it's totally not fair. So the kids know all this stuff. But the administrators never want to talk to those kids. So if you're an administrator and you want to know what's really going on at your school, you should ask the faculty, but they don't always know everything because they're not in other classes. Ask the top level students, the students who are who the teachers recommend, ask them, hold a little conference, and give them a special designation, like they're a part of a committee on student excellence or something. And you honestly ask, tell me, what are the academics like here? Do you feel challenged? Do you think things are not only fair, but also indicative of reality? Like, are the smart kids doing good work? Are the lower kids actually failing? What's going on? They'll tell you. So ask them. What do we owe our students? Last section. We owe them grades that send clear signals, give them a good sense of their strengths and weaknesses, and that communicate their areas of distinction to employers and admissions committees. Yeah, clear, honest, genuinely valuable assessment. That's exactly right. Students have come to us hoping for a meaningful education. I don't know about that. I think, as we'll hear from students here in a bit, students just want credentials. They want the grade so it looks good on their transcript so they can go to med school. Yeah, they want access, and they want maybe a recommendation, and yeah, they want a GPA. They want a letter grade. And then they're like, all right, I'm on to the next thing. As it just said earlier, again, she's kind of contradicting herself. Like this, she said the students, once they reach a certain threshold, they don't push past that. Like, okay, I got my B. I'm happy with that. That's fine. I don't need to do any more work. Well, you can't say that and then go, they've come to us hoping for a meaningful education. No, they didn't. They came to get a certain grade and then go do something else. Go play video games. Go drinking. Go whatever college kids do these days. That's not meaningful. So she's trying to have it both ways. She wants to kind of, be respectful of the students, but she's also critical. It's like, well, you gotta be honest about that. They are willing to embrace the rigor that such an education requires. Oh, no, they're not. I'm going to share with you students that are not. Again, your very, very best students will, yes, but that is a very small number. That I would argue that, well, that's probably 10%. That's 10% of your student body. Because after all, 90 and above, that's an A, right? Genuine A students, yeah, they'll probably embrace that level of rigor, but that's 10%. So unless you actually understand the 10% rule of the student body and how that correlates with your grades you give out, well, you're not going to understand what students are actually looking for. They're not going to embrace the rigor. They're not going to look for meaning. They just want the score. They just want the number. They just want to check the box. I went to Harvard. Check. I got an A. Check. Yeah, but did you learn anything? Oh, I don't know. But I went to Harvard and I got an A. Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything. All the data shows that that doesn't matter. Our students are as talented and as capable as they've ever been. Again, not quite sure of that. We need to look at more data for that. We're more dedicated to our teaching than ever before. I don't know about that either, because after all, if you were really dedicated to honest teaching, you wouldn't have this problem. Together, we can reverse the drift of the past 10 years and return academics to the center of undergraduate life. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it right there because this has been a very long episode, but this episode is going to continue. So this is part one, and I'm going to continue on with some student reaction as well as the reaction of another professor to tie all this together so we get the larger assessment report, but then also some feedback from other individual groups. And we'll pick up with this in part two next time. Thanks for watching. See you then.